Welcome back to Take Two, presented by LeftRightPolitics.com. I'm joined as always by Adam Matlack and Mike Pomerantz. Today, my question is, do our three branches of government maintain enough credibility to conduct actions like oversight during an election year?
Three branches of government. Oversight is the constitutional duty of Article 1, the Congress. I want to get back to that. Let me just talk about the court for the moment. The Supreme Court is, with the two decisions that have come out against Trump in the past week, DACA and LGBTQ protection for employees, the court has laid down a marker for maintaining its credibility. And I think this is very much by design. I'm not saying the court's not politicized. It's been politicized for ages. It's gotten worse. We've talked about how the selection of justices has become this horrible arms race. And you've talked about how it goes back to Harry Reid, and certainly McConnell has continued this really bad pattern. But Roberts, as much as I disagree with some of his jurisprudence, he's protecting the credibility of the court, and I think it's vital. And I don't have a lot of faith in the court, but I think going forward, at least if there's a decision, forget about what the president will do, the people will, for the most part, people crying and complaining on either side, but for the most part, I think they'll see the court as legitimate and not overly politicized, thanks to Roberts trying to hold a steady hand. Now, Congress, no. It's a dumpster fire, and I don't know how you get it back. But when the fracture between the quote unquote both sides of the aisle, a phrase which I hope I never hear again in my life, but I'll probably even say it again in the next 30 seconds. That fracture is devastating. And Congress has no credibility right now, which is terrible because they have a really big job according to the Constitution. And then when we talk about, so I'm worried that, just a few months out from the election, if Congress tries, or particularly if the House and Pelosi and Schiff, whom I love, I know you're not a fan, but if they are to bring it up again, if Nadler wants to investigate Barr a little bit, if they conduct heavy oversight, which results in articles of impeachment against Barr leading up to the election, which probably, from my point of view, that should happen. And we talked about this off camera a minute ago. Like, it might even be more important as we get closer to an election for the people to see the hearings, to hear from the people who are involved in these controversies, to hear from Barr, to hear from the U.S. Attorney SDNY, Berman. But I don't think they have the credibility. And that is a direct result of a lot of things, but the biggest one is the us and them mentality. And then when it comes to the president, I mean, he didn't create this situation, but he is rolling with it like I've never seen anybody roll with it before. So, I can tell you that on Monday it's black, and I'll tell you on Tuesday it's white, and that's it. Your credibility is done. And if you do that enough times, I don't know how you get your credibility back. And the problem is going to be for the next person who comes along. Boy, how are you gonna fix that situation? So I'm on the fence, but I'm leaning towards hold off on the oversight, which is terrible because it's their duty. The Constitution says you got to do this, but I think the House has to hold off because it will exacerbate this fractious nature, and the people are going to get some ability to decide. I realize there's going to be people on both sides crying about the election, crying about the mail-in votes, crying about the hanging chads, if you're old enough to remember that. But I think this imperfect process has to be given a chance to get us out of this. I don't think impeaching Barr is going to help politically. However, I do think constitutionally it is what the House should do. So if they did it, I'm not going to jump up and down and say, stop. But I don't think it will help.
It's a dangerous game to play that we're all seemingly pawns in as the legislative branch refuses to legislate. And in many cases, just like this one, will weigh political outcomes or perceived political outcomes in dereliction of their job. It's telling where we are in terms of that old moniker of the ends justify the means. We'll take care of this later. We'll get rid of Barr later. We'll do the right thing when we get back power. I'll toss the ring into the thing. Well, I think I'll keep it. I was like, this is how power works. And I had a teacher in high school, and she said it often. She's like, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right? And she was over and over and over again. I didn't really understand it when I was a freshman in high school, but sure as heck, I understand it a lot better now. The swamp is something that was talked about by Trump and probably, Thomas Massey, who I love, he's a great guy. And it's an interesting situation because it truly is this game of talking back and forth and patting each other on the back and do talking points on CNN and all these other things about tossing. And it's about winning elections in many cases. It's not about legislation. It's not about oversight. The FBI situation, the FBI has had like black eye after black eye in terms of just getting beat up by public opinion. And rightfully so. Going all the way back to Comey, like Comey's a moron and handled things in so many questionable ways. The whole Hillary email, the whole thing at the end, when 2 weeks before the election, the whole entire thing was handled like a total joke. And I think you go down that line, and it's gotten worse with the police stuff. With people have lost or been shown just how violent police can be and how outrageous some of this enforcement is. And it is bleeding into public opinion and distrust of all government. In many ways that's happening because, it's like the leaders are supposed to, the buck stops here, right? That's a famous saying by Truman. It was on his desk. He would take responsibility. Now it's, if it's Trump, that, the buck doesn't stop anywhere. It's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's issue. It's somebody else's problem. It's not my issue. It's not, he's a classic passer. He doesn't take anything on the chin. And, he's an interesting guy in so many ways because he literally, at least I believe, he literally believes that he is like God's gift. He truly believes that. And so I think Trump has helped people on the left lose, sight or believe in credibility of the government. And I think the right has been people who, even on Trump's side, who's like, oh, look at all this. They're impeaching Trump because of this, or it's just confirmation bias after confirmation bias of like, this is why you can't trust the government. This is why you can't trust the government. This is why, and it's just there's a lot more about why you can't trust the government than why you can out there today.
Absolutely, and the question is, how do you fix it? And I felt this way before Floyd, where I would ask myself, is this what a civil war sort of feels like? I realize there's not shooting, at least there wasn't so much shooting at the time that I was thinking that, but maybe a little bit more now. But the idea that that this can be fixed with an election so that we get Biden in office, we get rid of Trump, and it's just like, I really hope that my fellow Democrats do not subscribe to that oversimplified situation. And this comes back to what we were talking about before, where, Lincoln was like, take my hand, Confederates, we're going to be friends. We're going to go forward together. And I am, if Biden wins, I am going to be tempted to feel like that, to set an example for the world and for America, where it's like, look, let's just put it all behind us. Okay, let's go forward together. And it didn't work with Lincoln. And I don't know if it's going to work this time, provided Biden wins. But if we are prepared for, if Biden wins, if we are prepared for a longer period of trying to rebuild confidence in government and see that as an essential part of the mission, where it's about specifics and one thing that builds on another, as opposed to just like throwing money at a problem or just like putting lipstick on a pig and making it look like it's not as bad as it is. If we're committed to that, we can bring it back. I mean, look, even if Trump gets reelected, we could bring it back. The way to bring it's very easy. Senate impeach the Senate, tries him and throws him out of office. That would bring unity. And I realize that's maybe too easy, and I know it's too much to ask for, but I do think that is hypothetically a way that we could restore a lot of credibility. Again, people on one side are just really upset, really butthurt if that happens, but that's going to be a small number of people. If you have a wave of Republicans breaking with Trump, you will get not only Trump out of office, which is important, but you will get a big boost towards rebuilding credibility in government. It comes from people agreeing. And when you just can't agree on anything, and you don't legislate, you just punt everything down the road, of course, nobody feels good about government. And as bad as Trump's approval ratings are, I know we don't believe everything we read in the polls, but those same polls consistently show that as much as people don't approve of Trump, they really don't approve of Congress. Yeah. And that is a huge problem.
It's an interesting situation as we march towards the election. Trump's, I've seen polls like -14, Biden +15, all these things. And I can't help but to think that, they're setting themselves up pretty nice here for a very disappointing loss if they keep pretending like these little, everyone's opinion doesn't matter if they don't vote. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of people who don't vote, and yet they seem to answer the calls and tell them who they like more, and that's a nice little thing. But as Congress and as the presidency and as even the Supreme Court loses and continues to erode credibility, there's another institution in this country that's lost credibility, and it's the American people. You have to sit there and take a look in the mirror and tell me, and it's pretty tough for people to do that in many cases, of what are you doing to try to make it better. Everybody can sit. We can sit on the sidelines all day. I've been there, done it. I've tried to actively help. I've been the person who abstains. I've been the person who, block walks and, door knocks. I've been all those things. And you have to ask yourself, what part of credibility do we have as a society and as a culture that we deserve? Don't forget, the people who are elected are us. We elected them. We put them there. We put them up as a group. And so, it's one of the reasons why I constantly come back to individualism so much, is because it's if people can't govern themselves, then why would a group of people who can't govern themselves be able to govern other people? And Jefferson talked about this a lot. Come on. I think there's something missing in today's society, and I think one of the predominant things missing is personal responsibility. And and maybe I harp on that a lot, but it's one of the primary things. And one of the things here is where we elect these officials and they're supposed to, fix it all, and they need to do it all. And the only way we can affect change is through elections. And so it's an interesting, situation we find ourselves in. I hope we can restore credibility to the office of at least the presidency, because it's at least something that you can identify. It's why we have this love affair with the presidency. It seems it's like this one person who could who can have all this power and influence, and since they can go in and change, they can do all, but they don't have that much power. They're not that powerful of a person. Like Congress is by far more powerful in every single way, and yet we obsess over this one person because it's the only speedboat we have. This giant bureaucracy of 538 people can't seem to agree on anything. So we can elect this one guy and then he can do all this stuff. I hope we start to march towards a realization in the future of better, expecting more from our elected officials, not just Trump, but also your local officials and your congressmen. Please expect more. And that goes for, they should go after Barr, even in an election cycle, even at the detriment of if that's what they want to restore. If you want to restore honor and credibility and all these things, and I've seen the Biden ad, I'm going to restore honor and duty to the office. If that's what you want to do, then do it. Just be it. That's how you restore honor. You start acting honorably. And so here we are. Let's get it done. Let's start acting on it.
All right. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks as always for your thoughts. If you enjoyed our discussion, be sure to like and subscribe below, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks again, and be sure to join us for the next edition of Take Two, presented by leftrightpolitics.com.